Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War Raging Bull event in which the Bullserker is added to the game. Two things to mention before we get started though. Of course, yesterday I ended up doing a bunch of technology upgrades, and one of those things is a new computer. I have not revamped all of my settings yet. I've tried to get the audio and everything somewhat correctly. It's probably a little bit different than it was before, but that's something I'll still be modifying over the next week or so, so it might sound slightly off compared to normal. Other than that, we technically did have a patch last week that I didn't really cover to really much degree, other than kind of saying, hey, we had a patch, and that's it. That's mainly because pretty much nothing happened with it. The only things we really got is the capability to search for elite levels, a few different changes like bigger text here, and just a lot of extremely small quality of life changes. If you want to read the full changelog, it'll be in the description. I just felt like it wasn't really worth going over, as there is pretty much nothing of much relevance within the patch, but go check it out if you want to go check it out. But anyways, let's go and get into the video then. So today we're going to be going over a bunch of teams using a new legend that came in with the event key drop table, as well as some for the new faction. People have been mentioning that they've been wanting to see more faction teams. So every single Monday video, we will start including basically every single faction team for the Tuesday faction, which happens to be today since I'm recording it today rather than yesterday. But anyways, let's get into the Bullserker. Red, yellow, really good thing for upgrading a lot of utility troops such as Valkyrie early on in the game. Other than that, we have ourselves the Bullserker here. This thing is going to be very, 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 very bad later in the game. It's basically a Ketris for early game, kind of. It's actually, Ketris isn't a good example of a comparison to this, even though they're the same typing. I'd probably have to say it's actually more of a Orion. Think of like an early game Orion. Orion is generally a useless troop, and this thing is kind of no difference. It deals a bunch of random damage. Biggest issue with that is that it's completely random, and you don't know exactly what's going to hit to an enemy, and that's boosted by his attack, life, and armor. So for every extra attack, life, and armor, it'll end up increasing his overall amount of damage. So let's say he currently has a total of 180 attack, armor, and HP, which he almost does, a little bit lower than that. That would end up being 60 extra damage, which means his lowest value would be a 77, or a 77 hit, and his highest value would be a 94 hit. So it's not one-shot range, and that's probably his biggest issue, is later in the game he will not be one-shotting. He's mostly just going to be used in early game if you have absolutely nothing that can upscale properly. So for example, you could use like an Urskia shield with it, or a bunch of HP or armor buff to your entire team, or even an attack buff to your entire team to try to get his stats up. It also would be really useful with a bunch of medals, such as 24 additional HP, as he would end up gaining 8 additional damage off of that 24 HP that you would end up giving to your entire team. So stuff like that you'd be able to use them for particularly well in early game and mid game. However, the later you go, the more useless this thing is going to be. It is an ultra rare, so pretty accessible to be able to obtain. Traits are rather underwhelming, only being able to gain a little bit of extra attack while having 20% score reduction. Why on earth they added 24% score reduction, I will never know. But it's even weaker than Armored, which was already pretty underwhelming in most situations. But anyways, that's Bullserker. Nothing really too special, but definitely good red-yellow arcanes if you want to stock up on them. As far as stuff throughout the event this week, we have ourselves a new legend in the event key drop table. So if we go over to event key drop table and you open a bunch of event keys, you will have a chance of getting that new legend. As far as everything that is within the drop table this week, that is pretty much everything you see here. Actually, it is literally everything you see here. I believe there is no exceptions this time around, since there's no faction for this place, as well as no unique troops that are obtained by any other means. So yes, every single troop that you see underneath the sorting of Wild Plains is available this week. Just click show all if you don't currently own all of them, and it'll end up showing every single thing from this kingdom if you don't already own it. But this is everything you'll be able to obtain, including the bounty troop from event key drop table. The new legend is specifically Queen Moonclaw. What she does is creates 9 skulls boosted by green allies. Since she is green, that's basically 10 greens, similar to Dragon Soul. Even though it's a base damage of 8 and boosts to 11, it's always going to do 11 because it boosts based on itself. Similarly, this says it creates 9 skulls, but it will by default always do at least 10, given that it boosts based on itself, which is a green. So meaning you can get anywhere from 10 to 17 skulls based on how many greens are on your team and how many greens are on the opposing team. And then it summons a random Gnolls. Gnolls are a typing that isn't actually a type. Like, of course, we have actual types within Gems of War. However, we also have, like, subsections of types. For example, Spider is one of them that ended up getting added a little while back. And one of those other subsections of troops is Gnolls. So basically what Gnolls are all the troops that have damaged a single enemy with a 50% chance to hit the wrong enemy and then doing triple damage based on a certain typing. There are currently 4 of them, and there'll obviously eventually be 6, 1 per color at minimum. So those include Gnoll, Wildfang, Banejaw, and Savage Hunter. So any of them that are set up in this kind of fashion are the troops that it'll end up summoning. So could end up being somewhat decent if you end up getting a summon against, let's say, you're up against a brown team right now, and you don't currently have a counter to a brown, you just randomly summon this Gnoll. So there's going to be really, really rare situations where that could come into play, but overall, it seems like it's going to be too random to really bother with, and there's much better skull spammers out there. It might be a bit of a Wild Queen replacement in some situations, since you can kind of do you can kind of do the queen with a black beast and kind of do that kind of combo, and that'll kind of act like a wild queen, not exactly, but it's much cheaper than obtaining a wild queen. So it might have that kind of purpose for Green Guild War and a few other instances like Tower of Doom Green and other similar things. But overall, I feel like this new legend is going to be rather underwhelming. And the only thing that you would really open up event keys for this week, if you were to bother going for something specifically, other than maybe getting one copy of her just for the sake of having it for completion, is Catches the Bull. Catches the Bull is an insanely good mythic, still among one of the better ones in the game, mainly because he's really good at upscaling, other than all the other Tauruses that tend to have a 3-to-1 boost ratio or similar weak boost ratios. This has a 2-to-1, not to mention also does 50% damage to the 2 adjacents. The way you normally use Catches the Bull is you buff it up, you then cast on 2nd slot, you then cast on 4th slot, and ideally that would end up winning the entire battle. So that's generally the way that you structure using a Catches the Bull. You just feed him a bunch of life, attack, and or armor, and he's pretty much good to go. And then you just kill out the enemy team in a few hits. That is pretty much the whole premise of Catches the Bull. Really good with things like Urskea Shield or anything that can end up giving him a substantial buff to his stats. Sometimes in level content that is more towards your level, you tend to just mana generate for him with something like a Mountain Crusher in order to keep spamming his ability, since he'll probably one-shot even with his default stats in those kind of situations. But that is quite literally the only thing that is extremely sought after in this current event key drop table. Everything else, other than maybe the new legend, is relatively bad. And even the new legend's pretty bad, but you know, just to have it since it is new. But yeah, Catches the Bull, pretty much the only viable option in this entire kingdom, so not much to really go for. I wouldn't really overspend on event keys since he is the only thing that is worth it in this current drop table, but it is something to consider nonetheless. Other than that, as far as a little bit of bonuses that we have this week, we have 10% to all Tauruses, as well as 10% to all War Gears, which does not have much overlap at all. And we also have extra trait stone if you end up using this thing in PvP. The event troop, I would not advise using that, as he's most likely going to slow down your team unless you're under level 500. So pretty much you're going to ignore that unless you're a really low level just trying to get a few extra trait stones this week. And even in that situation, you'd probably just be better off with low level Explorer anyways, since even though you wouldn't be getting 2 trait stones per battle, you'd be getting higher rarity trait stones through doing the Explorer. Anyways, of course, we have Guild Wars this week. Don't forget to go and set all of your guild-related defend teams, and make sure to buff your stats if you're going to be doing that to any degree. And yeah, just make sure you have the right team set for every single one. Make sure you have a unique one so you get the full amount of 12,000 free points. So be mindful of that. We'll also be going over the Guild Wars every single night, of course, doing Guild Wars, messing with a few teams, and going from there with it. As far as events throughout this week, we have ourselves City of Thieves today. City of Thieves is one of the best farming factions. I would have a little while ago said it was the absolute best. However, ever since Mirrored Halls ended up being added to the game, this is a little bit less viable of a faction. I would still say both of them are almost equally viable, mainly because there are Cetric rooms within 1 room away from the start of this location, with 3 of them that could possibly appear. So City of Thieves, still one of the best farming factions in the entire game, but you basically have the choice now between City of Thieves or Mirrored Halls. So if you're currently doing City of Thieves at level 20, do be very, 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 very mindful that if you end up doing this faction assault events to anything above 20, it will permanently be above 20. So be very careful with that, and don't go above 20. Just keep dodging the battle before you end up getting progression on it. Actually, you can keep spamming the 20, but you can't, basically during the event itself, you can complete out the 20 itself. However, you cannot go and complete the 30. If you end up completing the 30 completely, it'll end up permanently increasing you to 30. So you'll just have to go and run away prior to completing out the 30 every single time, or to simply keep it at 20 and run away before the 20 just to make sure you don't accidentally do it. But regardless, if you're keeping this faction at level 20, do be mindful that if you do this event, it'll permanently increase your actual faction, so do be mindful of that. And do be mindful that you do want to keep ideally either City of Thieves or Hall of Mirrored Halls at level 20. Either one of those two you want to ideally keep at 20, as they're the best ones to farm on a daily basis. So regardless, if you are going to be progressing through this event, it's still a great place to farm, so you might want to do it to completion, or just do it a bunch just to get a lot of decent loot. Other than that, this Wednesday we will be getting Small Paka, which is just the purple mastery bonus, if I'm not mistaken. And of course you get the pet if you don't already have it, or more copies of it. Thursday we'll be having Shaman class event. Shaman class is one of those classes that seems like it might be good into the future with its 50% mana start that it has to all Tauruses. However, other than that, it doesn't really have much going for it, and Tauruses are a rather underwhelming typing. So we'll see how that progresses into the future, but as it currently stands, it's not too good of a class. It might into the future, but right now it is not. And other than that, this Friday, we have a really special Friday. It is a Vault event, and this is the second Vault event we've had since the patch that ended up bringing in medals into the game. So great time to go farm up medals. Also be the first, did I say faction event? I meant the first Vault Key event since they added medals. And this will actually be the first time I'll be able to grind it out quite a bit since I was away during the first time. But yeah, if you're looking to get Vault Keys to go get the new gnome that came in a little while back, or if you're just trying to do it to get a bunch of gem-related resources, or if you just want to go do it while passively farming other stuff, great time to go do it this weekend, as you'll be able to get a lot more loot from doing the Vault, or from doing Explore and PvP, Arena, and other similar locations. So great time to be playing the game if you want to go and grind out. And of course that happens about once every month, the Vault event. Other than that, Soulforge, what is good in Soulforge this week? And then we can go get into teams. So, as far as Soulforge, Obsidius is the only particularly good option. I still consider this relatively average in the current state of the game. However, this could potentially be really, really good within the next several months or so. So we don't know exactly when they're going to be doing this, but they are going to be adding more medals into the game. Currently, obviously, we only have one medal per rarity, so we only have one for common, one for rare, so on and so forth. However, one interesting thing about Obsidius, or specifically Stun, is Stun has the capability of disabling reoccurring medals. This isn't really seen too much in the current state of the game because there is only one reoccurring medal, and that is the Cedric medal, which has a 10% chance per turn to cleanse. However, Stun does disable any reoccurring medal, so if they go and add another 6 medals, one per rarity, and like half of them are reoccurring, and some of them might actually be decent ones, well, then Obsidius might be pretty good, because if people are constantly using those reoccurring medals, you can simply just go and stun them, and those reoccurring medals will be disabled, similar to how traits would be disabled. So it is something that's going to be pretty decent in that regard, and probably very, very soon. I would say in the current state of the game, there isn't too much usage for it, other than Guild War a little bit, though it is a Guild War week, so could bring them out for that. But yeah, it's mostly just used against things that don't have immune to stun that have good traits, or into the future into teams that use good metal compositions. So might be really good into the future. Might be considered something worth picking up. Definitely not one of your first pickups. This is something I would say more towards like your fifth or 10th mythic, or somewhere within that range, depending on when you exactly want it. So not a really high priority, but definitely a great utility troop that I would advise having. Other than that, you can pretty much ignore everything else in Soulforge, though I believe this is the first time Frost Feather is available since it was within the drop table. So it's not really worth going for it, but I believe this is the first time that it has been available. It came out on July, or very early July, so given how long the legendary rotation takes, I'm pretty sure that's the first time he's been around since then. Not really too relevant in that regard, but still something to consider. Other than that, we have ourselves 3 weapons that are all available over here. One of them is, actually one of these is the faction weapon, and I actually completely forget which one it is now. RIP. I believe it is the Night Dagger is specifically the faction weapon, would make sense as it is the one that is not from this kingdom. So yeah, that definitely is the case. So this is currently just available on Tuesday. This is just the one specifically from the faction event. If you're buying up into the faction event, you're going to get this automatically, so don't bother going out of your way to buy it. Other than that, we have ourselves the Primal Axe. This is mainly just a Wild Plains boost ratio kind of weapon. Again, there isn't really anything too good within Wild Plains to really use other than the spamming Ketris. However, this does create all of Ketris' mana, so it is something to consider if you happen to pull a Ketris and you don't really have a mana generator that you want to use with it, though you can just use Apothecary. But it's basically just a feed Ketris weapon in the current state of the game is the main thing that this would be used for. Other than that, we have a Ravager, which just ends up doing a bit of a splash damage, kind of like how Tauruses do. It's a pretty irrelevant weapon, and if you were to go for any of them, I'd probably go for Primal Axe and pretty much just ignore the rest. However, if you want them for completion purposes, those are the 3 that are available. This one only on this Tuesday, and the other 2 available all throughout this week. So let's get into a bunch of teams right now, and just go mess around with that. There is several that I want to go show. I am going to show this on the mid-range battle, as actually, you know, we'll show it on the higher one. This is technically a Green Guild War troop team. However, it is more so a mid-range Green Guild War related team. I am going to want to set my medals correctly for this though, so let me go set my attack up real quick. So we're going to go 20% start with 8 attack to make sure that this is set correctly for what we're about to do. So let's go and fight this out. First thing we're going to go show is, of course, here are the Gnoll summons, just as a refresher. Here are all the things that the new legend can summon: Gnoll, Wildfang, Banejaw, and Savage Hunter, which will be seen during the duration of this battle, possibly. And here is a mid-range Green Guild War team. Keep in mind this uses 0 mythics whatsoever. It does use 2 legends, the new legend that came in today. Or yesterday, I should say, and the Web Spinner, which is one of the best skull spam options in the game, with triple damage on skulls, which you can hit on almost anything other than troops that have Impervious. So basic premise that we're doing here is, of course, the fact that the entire team is green. We have Sister Superior in order to get ourselves cleansed if we end up getting entangled or anything like that. If not, we can also end up using her as a Devour option. So for right now, since she is frozen and we do not want to be frozen on green, I am just going to simply go and use that cleanse immediately, since we can see that it does not have any kind of entangle that will end up getting in our way. So the main thing we're going to want to do now is get skulls rolling as quickly as we possibly can, as that will be one of our main priorities for end up killing out this battle. So this does boost ratio per green within the battle, so we obviously have a full team of green. However, he also has 2 greens in this instance, a Yagway and a Tapon, meaning that we should end up getting a 15 skull gem spawn from casting this. Unfortunately, the board setup is pretty bad. However, I think we're just going to go for it and hope that it lands. Unfortunately, it does miss. That's going to be one of the biggest issues with this troop is it has a relatively low gem spawn for what it does. It's definitely not that high, given how much mana it costs, is 16. You'd most likely get better value out of using Keeper of Souls, definitely out of using Wild Queen, and other similar options. It's a rather underwhelming troop. This is going to be the bottom line with this thing, which is rather unfortunate, but it probably is going to be to a point where it's going to remain not exactly unusable, but to a point where it'd be very rare that you would ever bother bringing it out. And it might find its purpose into the future. Maybe it'll increase the amount of attack it gives. Because one other thing to consider too with this troop is it only ends up gaining attack specifically when you end up getting skulls. It does not increase the attack under any other circumstance. So unless you're skull spamming a lot, you're not really going to be able to gain much of a benefit from it. Plus, on top of that, not only do you have to take skulls, but it also specifically has to be green troops. If they're not green troops, they're not going to be gaining any benefit from the effect. So overall, it's going to be rather underwhelming, as you can see. So this is something that we already would have kind of known from the troop, but I still figured I'd show a team for it in case anyone did want to build around it. Obviously, it did die to a rather similar meta, which uses 2 legends, which of course is the Yagway Queen of Tanya combo, one of the best defend teams still in the game. It's been like that for like a year and a half, almost 2 years now. It's a really, really solid team. But yeah, that's how I end up fending. I guess we'll go try it one more time just to kind of show it off a little bit better as to how it should work. Though, again, this is more so just for lower levels and just as an option if you don't have other options. Generally for Green Guild War, one of the better ways to go tends to be either Web Spinner based, which is kind of what this team is, but with better skull spammers behind it, or anything centered around Wild Queen tend to be some of the better ones. You can also end up getting away with building completely around Yagway if you so choose, and any other decent green legend or mythic can normally be built around as long as it's a solid damage source for the day. But other than that, let's go and actually get Black Beast up. I think we are going to go down this route this time. Main reason for this is we'll be able to stack up on stats. Devour does ever so slightly lower your amount of points that you get during a Guild War battle. However, if it means you can secure a win, it is normally worth it if in the early to mid-game kind of area. So it is worth considering if you are struggling with Guild Wars to bring out a Black Beast, as Black Beasts can get relatively high stats, particularly when using a summoning option on your team. And there's several ways that you can do that, either off a hero, off of actual summoners. It really just depends which way you want to go about it. So right here, we're going to obviously want to get the rest of our mana for our actual summon, so that we can go get another summon to go feed our Black Beast. Looks like if we are in a pinch, we could go for that Desperate Summon, Devour. Do keep in mind, though, in a Guild War situation, you will lose points if you don't finish out a battle with a full team. So do be wary of that. So like right here, we will not have a full team when we go and finish out the battle, but we will be able to go and win the battle here. And as you can see, this was one of the 4 Gnolls that I mentioned earlier. This is the one that is particularly better against purples. It even has double damage against purples, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So yeah, you'll end up getting one of those 4 Gnolls. Into the future, we'll probably have 6 of them that will be able to summon. But overall, rather average troop, as you can see. Nothing really too special. As I mentioned earlier, Ketris is quite literally the only viable troop from the entire kingdom. Everything else is pretty much useless. So, other things throughout this week. If you're going to be farming the faction at level 20, here's one of the teams that you could use. A couple different ways you could revamp this depending on what exactly you want. Like if you want to use double Leprechaun or Leprechaun and Greed in order to get max gold capacity, if you want to go down that route. But this is more so just from a speed perspective, so we're basically just using a Sunbird Rowan Rush. You can most likely do this with a Armor Rush and just feed more so into Rowan, because she'll have higher damage output from the extra stats. Of course, from 24 extra armor, she would gain 48 additional damage, whereas from 24 HP, you would only get 24 extra damage on Sunbird, so it's normally better to go into your Rowan. You can also end up replacing out for Urskea's Shield into first slot. However, if you're doing level 20, regardless of what point you are in the game, as long as you're using 24 additional armor, you should be able to one-shot with Rowan, or very, very close to it. If not, that's what the Sunbird is for, in case they get a summon or anything like that. That will be able to go and clean up if your Rowan does not end up getting the kill. So you just throw a Leprechaun, you throw a Rowan, and then if they're somehow still not dead, you throw Sunbird. And that's basically the premise of this team. If you're rolling on level 20, and do be mindful if you go any further than level 20, it'll permanently be above level 20. Other than that, for faction 100, though do keep in mind for 20, I keep saying that, but you are allowed to completely complete out 20. You could just not go any further than that. So during a faction event, you have to go to 20. You can complete it out if you want, but then you have to constantly keep not completing it out. You have to keep running away before you finish out the 30. And if you're doing it on the actual faction itself, you go to your 1 times multiplier 20, and then just do it to full completion, and then you just keep doing that over and over again. And that's what I'm referring to when I say faction level 20. As far as if you're just doing the event normally, well, you can just do a Urskea's Shield into Rowan, and then just use a bunch of mana accumulation, either double Leprechaun or a Leprechaun Greed. You can also put another damage source if you want onto your team, but Rowan is most likely going to be enough in these kind of situations. And of course, this is a delve where you can end up using truffles, so if you want to go use truffles, you can. There's several variants for this. This, of course, is Warden with Fart Stroll, double King Gallop Truffle, and the Doom Weapon. The other pretty decent variant, of course, is to consider using a Mirage Queen onto this team in order to give your Farce Troll and Double King Gob Truffle 50% mana start. However, that would make it so you do not use heroes, so do be mindful of that if you end up doing that, as you won't be able to gain any kind of XP. The other slight issue with that is you won't have Dispel. One of the reasons for using Warden is you have Green Storm at start of battle, and Dispel, main purpose for that is getting rid of Submerge off of the enemy, so you don't have to go and deal with it, and it ends up making it quite decent, since you will be able to go and just hard counter out the Submerges, so your King Gob Truffle can actually do damage to them. So do be aware of that, as it can be very hard countered by those Submerges, and you normally want to have a option for that. Other than that, of course, we're going to be having the Shaman hero class for the Thursday class event. This is a rather underwhelming hero class in the current state of the game. However, one really relevant thing that it will have into the future that is only really applicable to Catches the Bull at the moment is the fact that it has a 50% mana start. So this will give all Tauruses, of course, 50% mana start, including itself, as it does count as a Taurus. And I just simply made up a little Taurus team here. Obviously, if you want to go down a cheaper route or not want to go down the Taurus route, you can simply just use Mang and just go with a bunch of mana accumulation behind it. Maybe even just use the yellow blue from the kingdom in order to feed it mana. But this is just a little bit of extra stats on everything, so we'll basically just be able to go in Mountain Crusher. The Chief will be able to gain us a little bit extra stats off our extra turn, and then we'll have 2 single hits that'll be able to boost ratio off of that, both off of the Chief's Stronghorn and on the new Bullserker, that will both have that same premise, and then Catches the Bull to go and clean up for a good majority of our damage, and just do it that way. Actually, you could probably even put Catches the Bull a little bit in front of it, assuming that you actually had it, as Mountain Crusher into a Catches the Bull would be one of your other most viable options too, if you happen to have multiple. I ended up getting one randomly last night on stream, so we actually have 4 Catches the Bull now. But if you have multiple, you can actually just run Mountain Crusher with like 2 or 3 catchable if you truly wanted to, and just go down that route. That might actually be what I do if I end up doing the event. But obviously, I wanted to show something a little bit cheaper. And worst comes to worst, you could literally just run Mang. Similar to most class events, Mang can just solo it. Just go Mang Titan and use mana generators behind it, and you should be perfectly fine. Maybe you might want to use one summoner, like the new legend that came in, just because if you do lose any troops within class events, it does count as 1 whole point loss. However, if you resummon those troops, it will count as 0 points lost. So do be mindful of that on the Thursday class event if you're trying for leaderboard, or if you're just trying to maximize your points. Though if you're not trying for leaderboard, there really is no point in trying to maximize your points. So if you're just doing it to get the event done to any degree, you probably won't actually need to worry about deaths onto your team. But anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for this video. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Let me know how the audio and everything was. I will be adjusting it more soon, but this was our first video ever fully recorded on the new computer, so we'll still obviously make adjustments, as still probably quite a few settings I need to modify compared to how I had it on the other computer, but we'll make tweaks, get it better, and hopefully we'll have some setup to be able to improve these videos too. Of course, most of the stuff I did won't really be improving the quality of these videos too much yet. However, I do have some things planned within the next month or two that we should hopefully be able to add specifically to videos themselves. So anyways, we'll be getting around to that soon. Hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will catch you all later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.